Yeah, everybody has the dots, so should be. Oh, welcome, Barry. I didn't see you pop in or drop in. That's what happens when you have the chat box cover half your screen, right? You miss people who come in. Okay, so I'm pretty sure I've met everybody here. I don't think I do remember Luna and Noble One and Barry, and of course Evil and Joe 10. So introductions are not needed. So we will get right to it. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to the Sublime One, the Worthy One, the Fully Enlightened One. So, it's been sort of a tradition that every time I come back from a retreat, I talk about my experiences, and I talk about the importance of retreats. While I didn't go on an official retreat today, or this past weekend, 4-day weekend, it is my own personal retreat that I made. It's just 4 days to go to the monastery and to meditate and be a part of life in that monastery, while there is no special events going on or anything like that. And I like to talk about my experiences because there's always a lot of people who've never been to a retreat, or they've been to a monastery, but it's only been a day thing, and it's only been a short time, so you don't really get to experience what a retreat is, and what it's like to live in a monastery. So has everybody here been to a retreat, or has anybody actually been to a retreat? And the retreat would be either at a retreat center or a monastery. It's usually like 3 days. Sometimes it's 7, 8, 9. Sometimes retreats are like 30 days or 60 days. I've never been to one of those yet, but those seem to be I'm not sure if there's many 60-day retreats in Theravada, at least not that I've seen. I haven't I have to get a 9 or a 10-day retreat under my belt actually first, but I can't imagine how my back would be after 30 days of meditating. Okay, SL is a treaty. Oh, okay. You've been to a retreat in Second Life? Is that what I'm trying to? I don't know. I'm trying to understand. SL is a retreat. Okay. Yeah. It's kind of funny because I was thinking about I'm wanting to do a basics of meditation class here, and it wouldn't be something that's like a weekly thing or even a monthly thing, just occasionally like a 1 or 2 hour like basics of meditation, and going over not just the how to sit and all that stuff, but the actual like dealing with all the stuff that pops up, the stuff that they don't usually teach you. And one of the things that I thought about, was like, wouldn't it be kind of neat if we did like a retreat? And I thought to myself, how actually would that work? I can't imagine like doing a full day retreat. You'd have to do about 4 or 5 hours of meditation, and then there would be like a Dhamma talk and like a question and answer thing. It would really have to be something that would, like, all of the teachers and everybody in Buddha Center would have to come together to do something like that. But I think it would be kind of a neat thing. I don't know how many people we'd have that would be like there all day, but you know, But can't cheat. No Twinkies behind the monitor. Well, you know what? That's what I always talk about. One of the things I always talk about when you go on a retreat, you take the 8 precepts. You only eat, with the monks. So you eat as the monks, the breakfast, the lunch, or the one meal a day, depending on where you go. But all of the precepts that you take and all of the rules, there's no monks hiding in the trees. There's no surveillance cameras in your kuti. There's no, the rules are there for you to enhance yourself. So if you eat a Twinkie, there's not going to be anybody that's going to stand out in front of your kuti in the morning. Okay, confess. What did you do? There's nothing like that. So you could, if you ate like 20 Twinkies, that's your own issue. That's something to meditate on. That's something to observe. Why you ate 20 Twinkies. So as a retreat, I'll explain. If you can get to a retreat, even if you have to drive a bunch of hours to do it, it's worth it. And the reason I say it's worth it is because it forces you to come into contact with and to face things that you normally wouldn't in your day-to-day practice, or that it's easy to avoid in your day-to-day practice. For instance, when you have to sit for 5 hours a day, when you're used to just maybe doing a half-hour meditation in the morning, a half hour at night, when you have to sit for 5 hours a day, your back is destroyed.
I'm afraid
You're like, you just you experience pain. You experience all of the issues. You experience negativity that comes up. And I'll talk about that, because I'll talk about that, my experience with that. You experience all of these things that come up. And if you don't have the right mindset for it, that can be a very negative thing that you take. Like, oh, I'm never going to do this again. If you have the right mindset for it, it's a learning experience. Every time I go to this place, Bhavana Society in West Virginia, it's a forest monastery, the first Theravada forest monastery in the country. It's 30 years old actually this year. Every time I go to this place, even if it's just for a couple days, I've been there 4 times so far. I've been there for a 5-day retreat. I've been there for a 7-day retreat. I went for my own 4-day weekend retreat over Wessex, which really ended up not much meditating, a lot of work, but that's part of the retreat as well. And then this past Wessex was in May, so I just did another 4-day weekend, and I'm planning to go back for a metta meditation, which I'm excited for, because I think it's gonna help the meditation practice I do on Thursdays. And it's going to be 6 days of just metta meditation. I can't wait for that. And do I know that my back is going to hurt? Oh yeah, it's going to hurt. Do I know that I'm going to reach my wit's end once or twice over the 6 days? Do I know that I'm going to be tired after the 3rd day and wondering if I'm going to be able to make it the other 3 days? Oh yeah, and all that's going to happen, because I've seen it before. This ain't my first retreat, so I know, and it always happens. After the 1st or 2nd day, you start to get this negativity, am I gonna really make it? I'm so tired. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And if you can make it through, you have these revelations that are just amazing revelations and insights. And I think I've talked about that in the past, I think I've recorded some of those talks. For those of you who don't know, I actually have my own YouTube channel, and I do. I record a lot of these talks and I put them on the YouTube channel, and I also do. I've done some short videos like in person in the past. I'm due to do a couple of them actually. I haven't done any in a while, but if you're interested in that channel, I could always provide that link, especially if you are a normal, a regular visitor and you maybe missed a day or something like that. You could always go there. But so I'll start. That's my brief introduction. Welcome, KJ. Good to see you. Into my brief introduction into going on a retreat. In short, it's an exhausting, painful experience that's 100% worth it. Okay, I think I'm done for the day now. That was my talk. So, what I usually do is it takes me 5 hours to get to West Virginia from New Jersey. So the retreats start like in the afternoon on the first day. So I kind of actually, even though it's not a retreat, I kind of kept that schedule. Friday, I left at 8 o'clock in the morning. I got there around 2 o'clock, and there's a couple things that I'm going to talk about that happened when I first got there. There's 3 monastics. There's 3 monks that live at Bhavana Society. There's Bhante G, Bhante Gunaratana, who you've all heard me talk about in the past. He's one of the famous monks in America. He's a Sri Lankan monk who's been here for 50 years now. He had like a dream to come and teach Dhamma to Westerners, and he's become very, very loved by Westerners. So he's, basically the heart of Bhavana Society. He's 85 years old now. If you have ever watched, anybody ever watched Kung Fu Panda? Anybody? Nobody's watched Kung Fu Panda? Come on, you've had to have watched Kung Fu Panda. Okay, well, you can think of Bhante G as Master Oogway, because the resemblance is uncanny. The resemblance not only in looks but also in wisdom is amazing. So I call him Master Oogway to my nephew, who loves Kung Fu Panda. Actually, I think I might love Kung Fu Panda more than my 7-year-old nephew. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So we have Bhante G, right? And then there's Bhante Silananda, who is also a very, very good teacher. He came from Sri Lanka in 2002, and he's been an instrumental part of my training in the last year as well. And then there's Bhante Dhamma. Bhante Dhamma is actually a Westerner. He's from where is it? It's one of those Midwestern states where they have that wonderful Midwestern accent. So he's this 67-year-old monk from I think it was Minnesota. Maybe that's where he's from, Minnesota. And he actually became a monk only when he was 43, something like that. And he was a mechanic in a former life. So he doesn't really do a lot of the teaching, but there's a reason why his name, I think, is Dhamma. His name is Bhante Dhamma. And he's not a good speaker. He's not one to be able to transmit the Dhamma through speech, but he transmits it through action. And just being around Bhante Dhamma, you learn Dhamma. It's amazing. It's kind of hard to explain, but just in the daily life of he's the guest master there. He takes care of it. He's almost 70 years old, and he gets up on ladders. He fixes things. He does all kinds of things. So I get there, and the monks do a walk every day, and every day they take like a different resident, or if it's a retreat, they'll take somebody. Like I've gone on walks with Bhante Silananda in the past, and so I get there and I see Bhante Silananda and one of the residents I met in my last visit, Mangala. A resident, for those of you who don't know, are lay people who reside in the monastery. Either you can be a resident for a month, you can be a resident for years. There's a wonderful guy named Robert who's the kitchen. He's the cook, the kitchen master. And I had been coming, this is my fourth time there. I had never known his history in the past. He's an older guy. I would say probably late 50s. Although I don't want to say that's old, but since I'm 34, so I can say older. And he is the kitchen master. He lives at the monastery, and you kind of wonder like what the history is. But I found out he was not a CEO, but a CFO of a major corporation, and he retired. And so here's this big time corporate person who's probably was making all kinds of tons of money, and he had his life and he retired, and he decided, I'm going to go live in a monastery and cook for the monks. It's very interesting people that you meet at these monasteries, especially a place like Bhavana Society that's so famous that every time you go up there, you'll meet people from all places around the country and all places around the world. People come to this place. It's an amazing place, a forest monastery. And so I drove up and I saw them walking, and I come up and Bhante Silana, they know me now. They know me as Jayantha. When I took the 8 lifetime precepts, Jayantha is the name Bhante Silananda gave me. You can see under my name there's the name Ferox. Well, the name Ferox is my internet name. I've had it in gamer name. I've had that name for 17, 18 years. So when I joined Second Life initially, before I knew about the Buddha Center and all that, that was my name. And when I received the Pali name, when I took the 8 lifetime precepts, that has become my name. Every time I go there, they don't know me as Joe, which is my which is my Western given name. They know me as Jayantha, or Jayanta. I'm sorry, I learned a little more Pali this time, so it's Jayanta, not Th, because the TH in Pali is like a T. But anyway, so he goes, oh, Jayanta, it's good to see you, but I will not see you. I'm going away. So I figured, like, I'd learn all kinds of things, and from Bhante Silananda, and I get to talk to him, and he tells me he's going to Pittsburgh, and he's going to this, and he's going to that, and so he's leaving. I'm not going to see him. So you go with expectations, right? And as soon as you get there, expectations change. I'll talk more about expectations later. But so I get there, and I also find out that Bhante Ji is not there either. And what I find out is Bhante Ji is in the hospital. He's in Johns Hopkins. Actually, he's there now. And what I found out was he's having heart issues, and they're actually yesterday. Today's Tuesday, right? Yeah. So yesterday he had a heart surgery, and I don't know how he's doing. I'm waiting on word from the monastery to shoot me back an email. But so I go there, and my 2 teachers are not there. So I thought to myself, you know what? That's fine. I'm just gonna meditate. I'll just, I have more time to go in the woods and meditate. The Bhavana Society is, I want to say it's about maybe 20 acres of woods on the side of a mountain, and there's about 20 kutis and walking paths. It's all woods. It's all forest monastery. It's very, very sparse. You can go to a monastery in the city, and you might find for lay people to have a nice bed or whatever like that. Nah. When you go to a forest monastery, you're living the forest monastery lifestyle, and that's actually why I love the forest monastery. because I'm a bit of a woodsman myself anyway. But anyway, so you go with these expectations, and bam, expectations are gone. It reminds me of my first teacher, who I consider my first teacher. You might know my first teacher. My first teacher was Bhikkhu Bodhi. Have you ever heard of Bhikkhu Bodhi? No? Bhikkhu Bodhi is another famous Western monk. He is a Western scholar monk. And when I first got into Theravada Buddhism, he has a 10-hour class, an audio class that was recorded in the 80s, and it's called The Buddha's Teaching as It Is, or as it, as it is. Yeah, The Buddha's Teaching as It Is. And it goes over everything. It goes over everything from the story of the Buddha to Noble Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, the dependent origination, Nibbana, Kamma, rebirth, Buddhism in the modern world. It's an amazing. If you've never, welcome, Ukoni. It's okay. When you go to a monastery, you don't wear shoes anyway, so it doesn't matter. I'm not wearing shoes either, in real life and in my character. So, where was I going? If everybody, welcome, and feel free to take a seat. We're talking about experiences going to retreats at monasteries. So where was, Bhikkhu Bodhi, that's where we were talking about. Bhikkhu Bodhi is, so in learning the Dhamma, learning really like I consider him my first teacher, right? But I've never met him. He resides at a monastery up in upstate New York, but he teaches a lot in a monastery in New Jersey called Bodhi Monastery. And I've gone to that monastery 5 times. I always planned to do it when Bhikkhu Bodhi was going to be there. All 5 times, he wasn't there. So I've never met him. And this is why I consider him to be one of my greatest teachers, because he taught me about expectations in life. When you expect something to happen in life, 9 times out of 10, it's going to happen in a way totally different than you thought it was going to happen. I'll give an example. I'm skipping around a little bit, but the last night, right? The last night I was there, I was thinking, because you like clean the room when you leave, you vacuum, this and that, right? So last night I half prepared, I half set up to, half packed. So, because you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and when you're at the monastery, and I was gonna, and I knew I was leaving after breakfast, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time, cleaning and stuff after. So I was thinking to myself, should I vacuum at 4 o'clock or 4:30, almost 5 o'clock? Because everybody should be up by then. There's only one other person in the place where I was staying, in a different room. And so it's not going to bother him. He's probably be taking a shower. So I was like, in my head, I had this silly this silly planning of what I was going to do the next morning, right? So I go to bed. I say, you know what? Whatever happens, happens. And I go to bed. So I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had to go to the bathroom. So I woke up. I tried to turn on my light, and it wasn't turning on. I'm like, well, dang it. I guess the light bulb busted or whatever. So I go back to bed. I wake up at my normal time at 4 o'clock in the morning. By the way, for those of you who don't know, when you're at a retreat, 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning is when you wake up. Bed is 9:30. I usually do it a little bit earlier. I usually go to bed at 9, wake up at 4. Because it's a little easier. If you wake up before everybody else, you don't have to feel rushed. You can take a shower, do whatever you need to do. But, so anyway, going back to so the light's still not on at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I checked the other lights in the place where I was staying. The lights aren't on. So I said, you know what? It's a forest monastery. It's in the mountains. If you ever been anywhere in the mountains, in a rural place, electricity is how shall I say? It's not stable. There's reasons that they have flashlights. People in the mountains, they understand that electricity is almost more like a luxury than something that, like, when you're home you expect the electricity to be there, and when it's not there, like recently there was a hurricane, and I was without power for 3 days, and my family got together for the hurricane, and my sister was going nuts. People were going nuts because they didn't have power or electricity. But if you live in the mountains, you expect that the power can go out at any time. So I walked down to the main hall, and there's no power there either. There's usually a light, right? So I wake up in the morning. The night before, I'm worried about, should I vacuum, should I not vacuum? All of this worrying was for nothing. There was no power. I find Bhante Dhamma, and he's like, oh, I talked to the power company about 2 hours ago. 400 people in the area are without power. So when I left, there was no power. So I had all of this silly workings in my mind, right, of all these planning, how I was going to do something. And the next morning, everything was totally different. That lesson, life will teach you that lesson almost every day. But I say this specifically because it's such a blaring example of that lesson, and it's another lesson that was reinforced by me being at the monastery, worrying about this, and it's not like I had high anxiety over it, but it was even just the wasting of mental energy for those 2-3 minutes of me thinking about it that I didn't need to do. I could have been reading more suttas or something, you know what I mean? So when you practice, you come to see that all of this stuff, when you make these plans, and you know 9 times out of 10 your plans are going to go to hell. They're done. They're shot. So the point is, making plans is not a bad thing, but are you able to be okay with it? Are you able to accept when the plans go to hell? And you have to adapt on the fly. The greatest generals in history have all said they made their battle plans, they made their backup plans, and then it all went to hell every time, so they had to think on the fly. So that's life, right? We always make these plans because we think that the future is stable. We think that we've got everything down packed, and then bam, life hits us. Everything happens the opposite or totally different than what we expected. And yeah, we wanted to go back to the book. Exactly. Well, that's the thing about Dhamma. That's the thing about this. You can know every sutta by heart. You can know all the books, but the books are really worthless. If you really come down to it, the books are worthless. Reading the books for a lifetime is not worth living the Dhamma for a day. Kind of taking a little bit from the suttas. If you know the suttas, they have the thousands, right? A day lived with mindfulness is worth more than 1,000 days lived without mindfulness, or 100 years, I think it was, something like that. That's in the suttas. That's I believe it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, because that's where you find a lot of the numbers. But so that's where my little line came from. But I'll go back to, one of the things I wanted to start with was, for those of you who have heard my talk recently, you know that I've kind of given up really basic TV. I've given up. I used to be big in listening to talk radio and stuff like that. I don't listen to the radio anymore. It's just silence when I drive. So driving to West Virginia, this was my first test. 5 hours of not listening to anything. Because I thought to myself, this is going to be a great test for mindfulness. And what I found out was when you're doing this, you're in the car for 5 hours, and there's no radio, there's no nothing. What do you do when you're in a car for 5 hours? I can tell you what I've done in the past. I've watched movies, I've listened to music, I've done this, I've done that. Because 5 hours you're sitting there, you're basically trapped. You're like in a coffin basically for 5 hours, a moving coffin. You can't do anything. So your mind finds things to do. So a long trip is the perfect time to practice mindfulness. Your mind is trapped. It can't go anywhere because it's stuck. And driving is a boring, repetitive task, especially driving when you get on the road and there's that there's 100 miles of straight driving until the next turn off. That is the time where you're most tested, because when you have to do a lot of twisting and turning, that you're more mindful of the road. And your mind is more concentrated on that because, hey, that's dangerous. If you take your mind off of it, you're going to get in an accident. You're going to miss a turn. But if you're on a highway for 100 miles, you're basically just going straight. You could probably just put on autopilot and just go to sleep. You're not going anywhere. You're going straight down the road, right? So you can't escape. Your mind can't escape. And in normal days, especially if you're not, if you're still early in your practice of mindfulness or your practice of meditation, your mind doesn't know what it's like to be at rest, at peace, just being there, calm in the moment. Your mind doesn't know what that's like. Even if you've been able to have some pretty serious and insightful meditation for a couple years, like me, it's been a couple, 2 years, maybe 2.5 years since my meditation practice has really kind of taken off. My mind still, after that, in that long distance, my mind still wants to do something. It wants to be entertained. It wants to be distracted from the monotonous driving of straight for 100 miles. So when you can't watch movies, you can't listen to music, you're not eating, which eating is another thing that I used in driving. It's a bad habit that I'm trying to totally eradicate. It's almost eradicated, but when you don't got nothing to do, what are you gonna do? You're gonna eat. You don't even know what you're eating. You're just eating to keep your mind and your body busy, right? While you're driving, eating.